Good Wednesday evening to you for Telesur. My name is Reagan Devines in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with this evening's headlines. The figure dead now at 186 as authorities continue recovery efforts after deadly mudslides in Guatemala. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro warns that December's parliamentary elections could be the most challenging yet. And Doctors Without Borders demands truth behind the US-led bombing of a Kunduz hospital. The details on these stories and more now on From the South. Thank you for being here with us. 6 days after the tragic mudslide in Guatemala, the number of victims continues to rise. At least 186 people are now dead and still more than 300 are missing, according to latest estimates. Rescue teams continue their search for survivors and the removal of debris amidst uncertainty, death and destruction. This is one of the worst natural disasters in the history of the nation. The number of homes destroyed is over 120. Authorities have launched an investigation on the premise that there could have been illegal construction in the area. December's upcoming parliamentary elections in Venezuela could be the most difficult ever for the Socialist Party. That's according to President Nicolas Maduro. He says that the absence of former President Hugo Chavez, in addition to the right-wing economic war in the country, are making conditions difficult. He took time, though, to reiterate his government's commitment to social justice and inclusion.
I do think it's going to be complex and difficult, but the country will eventually opt for peace, for tranquility, and we are the embodiment of that peace, that tranquility, that continuity. The need for an inclusive social model continues. Getting over the obstacles, we're the only ones able to get over the difficulties. The bourgeois would go to chaos, violence, and the revolution would be totally different.
President Maduro also hit back at U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry after he said that Venezuela was an imperfect democracy on Monday.
Why does John Kerry talk about Venezuela? Well, any officer from the United States is in an imperfect democracy. According to the Venezuelans, we have the best democracy that has ever existed in the history of Venezuela.
And today marks 3 years since former Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez won his last presidential election before he passed away. Chavez had won the elections with 55% of the vote, 11% ahead of his nearest rival. After his victory, he spoke and celebrated with hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans in the rain, images which are now iconic. President Hugo Chavez died only 5 months after his historic electoral victory.
You have my word for everyone who voted against us, my recognition of their enthusiasm for democracy, for their participation, for the civic demonstration, even if they don't agree with the Bolivarian answer. I am sure one day we can agree on the Bolivarian constitution.
The peace talks between the Colombian government and the FARC continue in Havana. The FARC presented its plans for the second proposal of the National Peace Plan to put an end to the armed conflict.
Las partes formulan el Plan Nacional para el fin del conflicto, la reconciliación.
The parties have developed the national plan for the end of the conflict, reconciliation, and peace building, which is an essential condition to ensure non-repetition and help generate real conditions and materials for stable and lasting peace. The peace plan will be constitutional and will be developed through a law of special character, which will respond to the extraordinary and final situation, and the commitments will be assumed by both parties for implementation.
And the Colombian government and the FARC rebel group have both appeared on the Nobel Peace Prize candidates list. This comes after last month's reaching of an agreement to sign a final peace deal by March 2016, after more than 50 years of the conflict. The winner of the Peace Prize will be announced this Friday. The breakthrough came in Havana, Cuba, where officials from both sides had met to try to hammer out the deal. If a final agreement is reached, it will mark the end of the longest running insurgency in Latin America. And Pope Francis is another one of the front-runners for the Nobel Peace Prize. Pope Francis has been vocal on and demonstrated his commitment to social justice and the environment. The Nobel Peace Prize is the global reward that garners the most attention and speculation. But right now it's anybody's guess who will the actual recipient be. Medical doctors say that Bolivia is struggling with a growing obesity crisis because of the consumption of high sugar drinks. Figures show that every Bolivian drinks on average 94 liters of soda each year. This is leading to big health problems for the population, as our correspondent Dimitri O'Donnell reports from La Paz.
Everywhere you look in Bolivia, there's evidence of the nation's addiction to soda. On every corner, in every shop, in every restaurant, consumers quench their thirst by taking high sugar drinks. 58-year-old taxi driver Mercadio developed diabetes partly due to his love of sugary drinks and a poor diet. He has many friends with the same problems.
Out of 10 of my friends, 6 have diabetes, 4 are fine, but my son is overweight and he also has diabetes.
Figures show that every Bolivian drinks a massive 94 litres of soda every year. That's the second highest rate in Latin America and an increase of 105% since 2000. Doctors are concerned and say the health risks are huge. More Bolivians are developing heart problems and diabetes because of drinks with high sugar content.
You can also develop diabetes, which is an equally delicate and very dangerous disease. It occurs when your blood sugar levels start to rise.
The American Heart Association has warned Bolivia is struggling with an obesity crisis. There's been a 48% rise in obesity levels in Bolivia, the third highest in all the Americas.
We need to educate the people more about the risks and damage that excessive consumption of these types of drinks causes, especially for young children.
Doctors say Bolivians should be eating far more fruit and vegetables, and the government is currently working on a law that prohibits false advertising of fast food and processed food. They hope this will eventually force people to change their eating habits. Dimitri O'Donnell, Telesur, La Paz.
The U.S. Secretary of Commerce Penny Pritzker was in Cuba to meet with the island's Minister of Foreign Trade Rodrigo Banmierka. The exchange was aimed at understanding the scope and limitations of the regulations issued by the U.S. government this year in order to modify the implementations of main aspects dealing with the economic, financial and commercial blockade against Cuba. The Center for Women's Rights have reported that in Honduras there is an average of 50,000 abortions annually, all done illegally, endangering the lives of women. For more on this situation, we turn now to Gerardo Torres.
Currently in Honduras, there is no sexual education in the public education system. Many birth control pills are prohibited and sexual violence against women is among the highest in the region, with 1 woman murdered each 14 hours. In this context, the Center for Women's Rights made an investigation into abortions, which are illegal in the country, but have registered an increase of at least 25% in the last 5 years.
The final results we found is that there were 50,000 to 80,000 abortions annually in Honduras. There is no sexual education, no birth control, and because of the high numbers of sexual violence, the number of pregnancies and therefore abortions is very high.
In Honduras, 60% of all pregnancies are women under 22 years old, many of them minors of 14 to 17 years old. There are very low possibilities for changes in the health policies that could improve women's sexual health. The only instructions given in the public health system are for teenage mothers.
This clinic works in an integral way, but of course the patient is already pregnant when she comes here. Our interest is to control her pregnancy and prevent her to get pregnant again. Prevent another undesired pregnancy is the reason of this clinic.
Sexual education is given to women already pregnant, and there is impunity of 98% on sexual violence. The increase of abortions in Honduras is another consequence of a very violent and discriminatory environment for women. Gerardo Torres, Telesur, Central America.
El Salvador's murder rate continues to climb, with gang violence being mostly responsible for the 72% increase in murders so far in 2015. In September, 4,942 people had been murdered in the Central American nation. More than 500 of those killed were children. A 2011 gang truce ended in 2014 and saw the violence skyrocket. El Salvador is home to more than 60,000 gang members out of a population of just 6.1 million. Many of the country's most infamous criminal organizations, such as MS-13 and Barrio 18, were actually founded in the United States by Salvadorans who had fled their country's civil war in the 1980s. Governments in the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States have embarked on sweeping measures to spur job creation, particularly among the youth. Youth unemployment is a challenging problem for the small islands. More now with Alison Kentish.
According to the OECS, the major effect of little to no growth in member states has been increasing unemployment and underemployment of young people, who constitute 3 of every 5 people in the region. Youth unemployment ranges from 49% in St. Lucia to 42% in Grenada. In announcing that his country's economy is now on the rebound, St. Lucia's Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Dr. Kenny Anthony, pegged his optimism for better employment prospects on the introduction of strategies that foster investment in competitive niche sectors such as tourism, agribusiness, and construction.
While I do not have updated figures on the rate of unemployment, I expect that unemployment will be contained and will gradually reduce as investment intensifies and the economy expands. I believe that there is good reason, barring any major disasters or calamities to befall us, for our people to look forward to the future with greater hope and confidence.
The OECS has been bringing young people together to hear from them. The meetings are being held across the 9 member states and associate member Martinique. The Director General says the goal is to help young people and to give them a chance to pursue their goals in challenging times.
Because when we look at the economic figures, youth are the greatest at-risk demographic in the population of the OECS. So the idea is to touch base with young people to get from them their views, their aspirations, the things, to find out from them the things that they would like to see put in place that could excite and motivate them to become better citizens, to become better prepared for the world of work.
The Caribbean Development Bank puts Caribbean youth unemployment figures among the highest in the world. The data indicates that between 1991 and 2014, with the exception of Trinidad and Tobago, all Caribbean countries had a youth unemployment rate above the world average. Bank officials are recommending job-led growth that is targeted and gender-sensitive, and have called for new thinking that identifies appropriate strategies for reducing poverty. Alison Kentish, Telesur, St. Lucia.
And the United States said they will not work with Russia in Syria. All this as Russia continues its assault on the Islamic State. This story and more next.
Wherever the news, you'll be there.
Rod stars G1 and Claudia de la Cruz are Rebel Diaz, hip-hop activists positioned within a history of political resistance through music. And You Don't Stop. They invite young people to express themselves about their social struggles. And You Don't Stop. Watch it on telesurtv.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there. Caracas, Havana, Mexico, Quito, Washington, wherever the newsmakers will be there. Watch it on telesurtv.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there.
Welcome back. Aid group Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders, have been most vocal after last Saturday's Kunduz Hospital US-led airstrike bombing, having cited the incident as a war crime. Now, the aid group is requesting that the International Humanitarian Fact-Finding Commission investigate the matter to ascertain the truth and to, quote, reassert the protected status of hospitals in conflict zones. The announcement was made at a press conference in New York by Doctors Without Borders Executive Director Jason Cohn.
The facts and circumstances of this attack must be investigated independently and impartially, particularly given the inconsistencies in the U.S. and Afghan accounts of what happened over recent days. We cannot rely only on internal military investigations by the U.S., NATO, and Afghan forces. Today, we've announced that we're seeking an investigation into the Kunduz attack by the International Humanitarian Fact-Finding Commission. This commission was established in the additional protocols of the Geneva Conventions and is the only permanent body set up specifically to investigate violations of international humanitarian law.
And the White House had said that U.S. President Barack Obama telephoned the head of Médecins Sans Frontières and apologized for the deadly airstrike on the hospital.
President Obama spoke by telephone with Doctors Without Borders International President Dr. Joanne Liu to apologize and express his condolences for the MSF staff and patients who were killed and injured when a U.S. military airstrike mistakenly struck an MSF field hospital in Kunduz, Afghanistan over the weekend. The President assured Dr. Liu that the Department of Defense investigation currently underway would provide a transparent, thorough, and objective accounting of the facts and circumstances of the incident, and that if necessary, the President would implement changes that would make tragedies like this one less likely to occur in the future.
Over the past week, Russia has released videos which claim to highlight their bombing of Islamic State targets. However, U.S. officials continue to discredit the footage, saying that the bombings are actually of other targets that oppose Syria's leader, Bashar al-Assad. At a press conference in Italy on Wednesday, U.S. Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter said that there is absolutely no collaboration between the United States and Russian forces. Russia had said that it would work with Assad in bombing IS targets, a move rejected by the United States, which wants Assad's regime removed from office.
Despite what the Russians say, we have not agreed to cooperate with Russia so long as they continue to pursue a mistaken strategy and hit these targets.
Meanwhile, new Russian airstrikes have been documented in Syria by the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. The organization said that 4 locations were hit in Hama and Idlib provinces and that the strikes were, quote, more intense than usual. No death toll has yet been determined. For more on the Russian strikes in Syria, here is Telesur's Hazem Abdullah.
Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said Wednesday morning that 4 Russian warships in the Caspian Sea targeted ISIS sites in Syria, firing 26 missiles, and that the missiles destroyed 11 Islamic State-held sites. He added that the Russian warships have targeted 111 Islamic State sites since the beginning of the Russian air campaign.
Everyone has to stand by Russia, which has moved from the first day as a credible force on the ground, and we hope from the United States and the Europeans to wake up and really participate on the ground with the Russians to fight Daesh and to fight against all who stand in the face of humanity.
Russia and its entering on the war against the terrorists has dramatically changed the domestic front in the war on terrorism and on the international level, and we thank them for their support, whether military or otherwise, and thank their sincerity in their positions.
Major General Igor Konashenkov, the spokesman of the Russian Defense Ministry, said, "We don't rule out that terrorists may be preparing provocations in these and other settlements to blast mosques and then demonstrate fake photo and video materials with executions against Russian aircraft on the territory of the Syrian Arab Republic."
Terrorists who come to Syria living in a state of delusion and cite religious arguments to gather people around them. But the fact is that they do not have a real sitter. In Syria, it's true that there are those who owe allegiance to them, but they are few, and they are using mosques and religious centers to mobilize Muslim opinion to stand on their side.
The Russian Defense Ministry said that ISIS terrorists are hiding weapons and gear in residential neighborhoods. The Russian Defense Ministry published the video clips taken by drones showing vehicles and ammunition trucks congregating in the vicinity of mosques in Idlib province north of Syria. Hazem Abdullah, Telesur, Syria.
A renewed mission to target human smugglers in the Mediterranean Sea is underway. The mission will utilize warships from several European Union nations, which have been seeking reliable means of better controlling the influx of refugees into the region. Smugglers ask refugees for large sums of money, then transport them on often unstable flotation devices across treacherous waters, which this year has so far resulted in the deaths of thousands. It's a new approach to the treatment of abusers of illegal drugs. The United States has decided to release about 6,000 federal inmates who had been serving time for non-violent drug-related offenses. More attention will now be placed on preventative and treatment measures to curb a scheme that had historically placed drug abusers in prison cells, side by side with those who took the lives of others. The move to release the prisoners is also being seen as a way to reduce the overcrowding in the nation's prisons. The move has also been welcomed by the United Nations.
The Secretary General welcomes the decision by the United States government to release approximately 6,000 prisoners from federal. Consideration needs to be given to alternatives to criminalization and incarceration of people who use drugs, with an increased focus on public health, prevention, treatment, and care.
British Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn struck back at Prime Minister David Cameron, who accused him of being a terrorist sympathiser. Cameron, who was addressing his Conservative Party members at their annual conference, seemingly took a quote from a 2011 Corbyn interview out of context by saying that the Labour leader believed the death of terrorist leader Osama bin Laden to be a tragedy. Corbyn responded by saying that he will not engage in name-calling with the Prime Minister, but instead challenge the nation's issues in democratic and open debate.
My friends, we cannot let that man inflict his security-threatening, terrorist-sympathising, Britain-hating ideology on this country we love.
The entrances to Jerusalem's Old City have been sealed off by Israeli police. This comes even after they cancelled the controversial age restrictions for Muslims to enter the Al-Aqsa Mosque. In the past 2 weeks, 5 Palestinians and 4 Israelis have been killed and over 170 injured. So high is the tension there that Israeli newspaper Yedueth and Roth had said that this could be the third intifada or uprising against Israeli occupation. Over 100,000 protesters rallied in Brussels against austerity measures introduced by the government of Charles Michel. The peaceful protests were some of the biggest protests since November 2014, when riot police attacked protesters with tear gas and water cannons. 3 of Belgium's main unions joined the protests on a common platform that renounced policies implemented by the centre-right government, including cuts in social services and tax measures aimed at benefiting employers. 3 people were announced as the joint winners of the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. The work of Thomas Lindahl of Sweden, Paul Modrich from the United States, and Turkish-born Aziz Sankar uncovered the mechanisms used by cells to repair damaged DNA. This is a fundamental process in living cells and important in cancer research.
So these discoveries have actually made it possible to develop new kinds of drugs against cancer. And it's based on the idea that cancer cells already have kind of a weakened DNA repair system. They don't repair the damages that they undergo as efficiently as normal cells. So then if you can come in with a drug that makes the DNA repair systems even less functional, the cancer cells will really go bad because they cannot repair at all their DNA anymore. And very quickly, this will degrade the DNA and the cancer cells cannot survive.
And now a brief look at other stories making news around the world.
7 people were killed by a suicide bombing that took place outside of a mosque in Yemen's insurgent-held capital of Aden. No one has yet claimed responsibility for the attack, however similar attacks have been carried out previously by the Islamic State. The general behind the failed coup attempt in Burkina Faso on September 17 has been charged. Dehibril Basso was the former top aide to ousted President Blaise Compaoré. General Gilbert Diefenry was also charged. The pair were remanded in custody. Up to 25,000 people gathered in protest in Copenhagen, Denmark earlier today. They protested against the government's slashing of benefits in half for newly arrived refugees. The new regulations come as no surprise that the ruling party has placed anti-immigration near the top of its agenda since gaining power in June.
FIFA President Sepp Blatter is now facing a 90-day suspension Blatter could face the suspension if FIFA's ethics judge backs a recommendation from a prosecutor. The decision will be made by Judge Hans Joachim Eckert and is expected by Friday. Blatter is currently being investigated by Switzerland's Attorney General regarding a television contract and an alleged disloyal payment to UEFA President Michel Platini. Both Blatter and Platini have denied any wrongdoing. Walls in Ukraine's capital, Kiev, are being filled with colorful works of art, reflecting a new mood of optimism in the city once crisscrossed with barricades. Ukrainian and international urban artists are creating dozens of street art projects with materials donated by the local authorities, who aim to heighten the spirits of the viewers with peaceful images. One of the projects depicts the Maidan Uprising that swept away the pro-Russian president Viktor Yanukovych. The artworks are being received with joy by most of the residents.
There are 3 more murals, I think, on the project. There's another one in a big avenue, but this is close to the school. And the idea also with this classic composition, blah, 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 is to add a lot of colors. Then the children could do their own interpretation, you know.
And to close this Wednesday evening, it's been closed for 8 years for major renovation work, but now the impressive mansion turned museum will be open to the public from Thursday in Lebanon. The Sursak Museum is the first interactive museum for contemporary art, and entrance will be free of charge. It will house exhibits that honor the history of art in Beirut. And there is more on these and other stories on our website, telesurtv.net/English. From our news teams in Quito, Ecuador, and right here in Caracas, Venezuela, my name is Reagan Devines. We hope you can join us again on From the South tomorrow. Have a great evening.